The Autistic Culture Podcast Network, the sound of autistic culture. ACPN.
That's the sound of drumsticks, setting the tempo for change. In the 60s, Stax Records in Memphis defied segregation with multicultural bands like Booker T and the MGs, proving soul music could move more than feet. This is one of many sounds in Tennessee with a story to tell. To hear them in person, plan your trip at tnvacation.com. Tennessee sounds perfect.
Quick question. When was the last time a display ad changed your mind? Now think about the last time a friend told you about something they loved. Different feeling, right? That's how podcast advertising works. A host who's built real trust with their audience talks about your brand in their own words, in their own voice. It doesn't interrupt the experience. It's part of it. With Acast, you can access the world's largest podcast marketplace. Choose the right shows, the right audiences, the right format. Then watch the data tell you it worked. You're not buying impressions. You're buying influence. Learn more by visiting acast.com/advertise.
Welcome back to Mindful Mondays. I'm your host, Ashley Dupuy, and this is your weekly space to slow down, soften the edges, and meet your inner world with curiosity and care. Right here on the Neurodivergent Experience podcast. Whether you're neurodivergent, highly sensitive, or simply trying to understand your brain and body with a little more kindness and honesty, you are so welcome here. And today, we're continuing our From Mask to Map series, and we're doing something that I think may become a regular feature on the podcast. We're going to take a culturally relevant idea, something widely shared and widely discussed, and widely absorbed into the self-help and wellness world, and ask, what is the neurodivergent nuance here? Because as we explored last week, advice doesn't always land in every nervous system the same way. A phrase that feels freeing to one person may land as pressure in another. Or a slogan that helps someone create boundaries may teach someone else to tolerate self-harm. A piece of advice that is meant as empowerment can become self-abandonment when it is taken literally or applied without context or absorbed by a nervous system already trained to override itself. So today we're looking at Mel Robbins' Let Them theory. And I want to say right at the beginning, I really like this theory. When I first heard it, something in me immediately went, yes, this is useful. This is clean and powerful. And at its heart, the idea is beautifully simple. Let people be who they are. Let them make their choices. Let them reveal their priorities. Let them misunderstand you. Let them not invite you. Let them have their own opinions. Let them behave how they're going to behave. And instead of exhausting yourself trying to control or persuade or explain, manage or chase or convince, or fix or shape them into what you think they should be, you return your attention to your own life, your own choices, your own boundaries, your own peace. And that is genuinely powerful. And it's also, in many ways, ancient wisdom in modern language. Because this is very close to mindfulness. It's close to Buddhism. It's close to the serenity prayer. And it's close to the circle of control. It's close to all of the teachings that remind us that suffering often intensifies when we become attached to how reality ought to be, rather than seeing what is actually here. So the more we insist that someone should be different, or someone should understand, or should apologize, or should include us, or should behave how we would behave, the more we can end up trapped in an argument with reality itself. And reality will always win. So at its best, Let Them is a practice of releasing the exhausting illusion of control. It says, stop arguing with the fact that this person is showing you who they are. Stop trying to manage someone else's nervous system. Stop trying to earn approval from people committed to misunderstanding you. And stop burning your life force on what is not yours to carry. That is all really good medicine, especially for those of us who've spent far too much time trying to organize ourselves around other people's reactions. But, and here's where we need the neurodivergent nuance, advice culture can be slippery. And slogans, even helpful ones, can become dangerous when they are used without the right context. Because many neurodivergent people are not starting from a cleaned, boundaried, self-trusting place. Many of us are starting from a history of masking, a history of fawning, of being told that we're too sensitive or too literal or too much, a history of not knowing whether our needs are reasonable, a history of second-guessing our own perception, and a history of trying to be easy, trying to keep the peace by abandoning ourselves. So when a neurodivergent person hears "let them," they may not hear "observe reality and reclaim your agency." Instead, they may hear "put up with it, don't make a fuss, stop needing anything, and detach from your pain. Don't hold a boundary. Let them hurt you and call it peace." And that is where we have to slow down, because non-attachment is not the same as self-abandonment. Acceptance is not approval. And letting people be who they are does not mean giving them unlimited access to you. And this is the crucial distinction. To let someone be who they are is not the same as letting them do whatever they want in your life, your body, your home, your relationships, or your future. It simply means you stop arguing with the data that they're giving you. If someone repeatedly cancels, let them show you that pattern. If someone criticizes your sensitivity, let them have their opinion. If someone cannot meet you with the care that you need, let that information be information. And then we need something more, really, don't we? This is where I want to introduce a phrase that has been emerging more and more clearly in my own work. Aware, allow, align. And this is something I'll be talking much more about in future episodes because I see it fitting into so many different modalities, so many different types of inner work. Internal family systems, transactional analysis, CBT, ACT, addiction work, meditation, trauma work, behavioral change. Honestly, the list is endless. And the more I sit with it, the more I see it everywhere. And I think it gives us a really grounded way of working with something like the let them theory. Because if we simply say let them without a process, it can become a bit too vague. And as we explored last week, vague advice landing in a precise nervous system can create all kinds of confusion. So for me, the missing link is aware, allow, align. So let's deconstruct this. First, we become aware. We cultivate the witness. And this awareness is in two directions, both outward and inward. So outwardly, we ask, what is actually happening here? What is the reality being shown to me? So we become aware of the facts of the moment. This person has canceled, or this workplace is overstimulating. And inwardly, we ask, what am I feeling? What do I feel in my body? What emotion is here? We become aware of the facts of the moment. I feel hurt. I feel angry. I feel embarrassed or activated. And this awareness matters so much because so often we rush to interpretation before we've actually noticed what is happening inside of us. We try to leap straight into letting go while the body is still saying, hold on a second, wait, something hurt here. And that internal awareness is not indulgence. Again, it's data. Your body is almost always giving you information worth listening to. And then we come to allow. And allow also has two directions. We allow the external reality to be what it is. This is what is here. And we also allow the internal reality to be what it is. Instead of arguing with the feelings that are cropping up, we give them a moment of recognition. Of course this hurts. Of course I feel sad. Of course I feel angry. That makes sense. And that phrase, that makes sense, can be incredibly powerful for neurodivergent people. Because so many of us have spent years being told that our reactions are too big or too intense or too sensitive or too confusing. So before we align, before we act, before we boundary, before we choose what to do next, we give our inner world the dignity of recognition. We let reality be reality, both out there and in here. And then we align. Given what is true externally, and given what is true internally, what action aligns with my values, my safety, my body, and my needs? That is the part we cannot skip. Because for neurodivergent people, especially for those of us who have masked and fawned, overfunctioned, intellectualized, and tried to be endlessly understanding, allow can become dangerous if it's not followed by align. Aware gives you the information. Allow acknowledges the reality. And align gives you your life back. And this, to me, is the neurodivergent nuance of Let Them. Let them show you what is true. And align by believing the data. This is not cold or uncaring or being indifferent. It's what happens when compassion grows a spine. And I think this matters deeply because neurodivergent people can be incredibly passionate, deeply reflective, highly analytical, and very willing to see all sides of a situation. That can be beautiful, but it can also become a trap. Because if you can understand why someone behaves the way they do, you may start thinking that you have to tolerate it. If you can see their trauma, you may excuse their behavior. If you can see the systemic issue, you may minimize the personal impact. If you can explain the pattern, you may forget that you're still allowed to respond to it. Understanding is not consent, and empathy is not an obligation to stay available for harm. This is where advice culture often fails sensitive and neurodivergent people. And what I'm realizing more and more is that aware, allow, align is, in many ways, a way of gently deconstructing radical acceptance. And radical acceptance is really the deeper wisdom underneath Let Them. Because the word acceptance can trip people up too. Acceptance can sound like approval. It can sound like permission or giving up. But radical acceptance at its heart is not approval. It is seeing reality clearly. It is the moment when we stop spending all of our energy arguing with the fact that something is happening and begin gathering enough presence to ask, what is actually true here? And what is mine to do next? And this is where aware, allow, align becomes so useful. Because first we become aware. And awareness is not just thinking about the situation. It is naming what is here. I feel angry. I feel rejected. I feel afraid. And that act of naming matters so much. And in meditation, labeling itself is a practice. And in nervous system work, naming what we feel helps create just enough space between us and the intensity of the moment. It helps us move out of our amygdala and into our conscious brain. So instead of being completely inside the fear, completely inside the hurt, completely inside the old story, we begin to become the witness. And that separation is powerful. Because the moment I can say, this is anger, I am no longer only anger. The moment I can say, this is shame, I am no longer completely fused with shame. And the moment I can say, this is my fawn response, I am no longer entirely inside the performance. A little space opens. And in that space, autonomy begins to return. So awareness is not passive. Awareness is the doorway back into choice. And then we allow. We allow the external reality to be what it is. This is what happened. And we also allow the internal reality to be what it is. These feelings are here and they make sense. We give the feeling recognition before we bring in other truths to rest alongside it. And this is so important for neurodivergent people because so many of us have been trained to skip over our own reality, to explain it away, to minimize, to intellectualize, to be reasonable before we've even admitted that something hurt. So allowing says, let's stop resisting what is here, both out there and in here. And then we align. Given the external reality and the internal truth, what is the next action that aligns with my values and my body and my needs? That might mean a boundary or a conversation. It might mean leaving. It might mean asking for clarification. It might mean staying, but staying differently. And it might mean allowing someone to be who they are while no longer organizing your nervous system around trying to make them different. So for me, aware, allow, align turns radical acceptance into a living process. Aware gives you the truth of what is happening. Allow gives your system permission to stop fighting reality. And align brings you back into agency. And that is the missing link. And this is also why I keep creating guided practices and yoga nidras over on Insight Timer. Because so much of this work has to happen beneath pure cognition. We can understand these concepts intellectually, but the nervous system needs felt experience. It needs rhythm and breath, imagery, repetition, and safe contact with the body. A way to practice awareness and allowance before we ask ourselves to align. So let's look at a few practical examples. Okay, let's say a friend doesn't reply to your message. Let them. Aware. I notice rejection sensitivity. I can feel it in my body. A story is beginning that I've done something wrong. Allow. This is the current reality. I do not yet know why. And internally, I'm allowed to feel what I'm feeling. This activation makes sense. Align. I can soothe my body and I can wait and ask clearly later if needed, and not abandon myself to spiraling or chasing. Okay, let's look at another example. How about your workplace ignores your sensory needs? And this is where let them needs real nuance. Aware. This environment is harming my nervous system. I feel depleted and overstimulated and increasingly unable to recover. Allow. This is the current reality of the workplace, and my body's response is useful data. Align. I may need to document and request adjustments, escalate, seek support, or begin planning a different path. Not simply tolerate or detach, but align. Or let's say a person keeps interrupting your recovery time. Do we let them? Only if let them means, let me see clearly that this pattern needs addressing. Aware. My body is overwhelmed. I'm feeling resentment rising. My recovery needs are being interrupted. They may not understand the impact yet. Allow. This is the reality, and my frustration makes sense because my body needs care. Align. I'm going to state a very clear boundary and ask for what I need. This is the difference between passivity and practice. And this is where I think Buddhism gives us such a useful anchor, because non-attachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing control with care. You can care deeply about someone and still stop trying to manage their choices. You can wish for repair and still stop chasing it from someone unwilling to participate. You can allow reality to be reality and still take action. This is the middle path. The poet Rumi once wrote, "Life is a balance between holding on and letting go. Not clinging, not collapsing. Aware, I notice the data. Allow, I let reality land. Align, I choose the next best step." And this keeps "let them" from becoming passive and brings you back into relationship with your own body, your own values, and your own agency. And if this kind of work speaks to you, this deeper exploration of nervous system literacy and masking, self-trust, and learning how to move from mask to map, I'm currently taking expressions of interest for my September group coaching cohort. You can email me at integrativeiom@gmail.com if you'd like to register your interest or to find out more as the details unfold. Because this is really what From Mask to Map is all about. Not rejecting every piece of advice or deciding every mainstream idea is wrong, but learning to translate it through the truth of your own nervous system. Learning to ask, what is the neurodivergent nuance here? What does this mean in a body like mine? What does this mean in a history like mine? What does this mean if I am already prone to fawning or burnout, literal thinking, over-responsibility, codependence, or self-abandonment? Because there really is wisdom in Let Them. There really is. There is a freedom in releasing trying to control things that aren't in your circle of control. There is relief in acknowledging the truth of your experience. There is maturity in allowing people to be who they are. And there is peace in not organizing your whole life around other people's opinions. But the map is incomplete unless it also brings you back to yourself. So go ahead, let them. Become aware. Allow what is happening outside of you and inside of you to be recognized, and then align. That, to me, is the missing link. That is the neurodivergent nuance. So now, after all of this exploration, we're going to keep today's guided practice very simple. A very short mindfulness meditation using the breath and gentle labeling and the framework we've been exploring today. Aware, allow, align. This is a practice of noticing what you're noticing. Because in meditation, the mind will wander. That is not a mistake. That is what minds do. The practice is not to force the mind to be blank. The practice is to notice when the mind has wandered, gently name what is happening, allow it to be there without struggle, and then align your attention back to the breath. That's it. So if you are currently driving or operating heavy machinery, please ensure to pause the recording now until you can safely come back into stillness. And just go ahead and find a nice, comfortable position. You can be lying down or sitting upright, whatever feels most supportive for you today. And just let the body be as comfortable as it can be. And whenever you feel ready, feel free to gently close your eyes and let your face soften and your hands rest. And begin by noticing the simple fact of the body breathing. No need to change the breath. Just notice. Breathing in and breathing out. The inhale arriving and the exhale leaving. The body breathing itself. And now allow your attention to rest with the breath. Maybe you notice it in the nostrils, or maybe you notice it in the chest. Just choose one place where the breath feels easiest to notice, and simply rest your awareness there. Breathing in and breathing out. And as you stay with the breath, at some point, the mind will wander. It may move into the future. It may begin planning, rehearsing, working things out. And when you notice that, simply label it gently as planning. Or perhaps labeling it just as thinking. Aware, planning is here. Allow, this is what the mind is doing. Align, return to the breath. Breathing in and breathing out. And perhaps the mind moves into the past, a memory, a conversation, something you're replaying. And when you notice that, simply label it, remembering, or even just thinking, softly and kindly, as though placing a small name tag on the experience. Just allowing it. And then gently align back with the breath. The inhale and the exhale. This breath, this moment. And perhaps the mind brings up a feeling, a worry, an irritation, maybe a boredom. And if that happens, you might simply label it feeling. Whatever feels right. And notice what happens when you name it, when you allow it to be. A little more space opens. You are no longer completely inside the thought. You're becoming aware that this is here, You are allowing it to be noticed. And then you align by returning to the breath. Breathing in and breathing out. And again, when the mind wanders, as it will, you can label thinking, or planning, or remembering. And then back to the breath. The noticing is the practice, and the return is the practice. Aware, allow, align. And go ahead and take a nice deep breath in. And a long soft breath out. And begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. Maybe move your head from side to side. And whenever you're ready, and not a moment before, you can feel free to gently open your eyes. Coming back into the room and bringing with you this simple reminder. You can notice, you can name, and you can return again and again. And that is the beginning of freedom. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's Mindful Monday. And if today's practice resonated with you, you'll find more meditations and yoga nidras and deeper guided journeys over on my Insight Timer channel. Just search for Ashley Dupuy. That's Dupuy. And if this From Mask to Map work is speaking to something in you, I'm currently taking expressions of interest for my group coaching cohort beginning in September. You can email me at integrativeiom@gmail.com to register your interest or find out more as the details unfold. And next week, we'll continue this thread by looking at the neurodivergent nuance of advice culture. Those punchy phrases like, do the hard thing, no excuses, no pain, no gain, get out of your comfort zone, and asking the essential question, what is the neurodivergent nuance here? Until then, may you notice what you're noticing, and may you name what is here with kindness. And may you remember that awareness itself is already a way home. And as always, remember, we're all just walking each other home.
Quick question. When was the last time a display ad changed your mind? Now think about the last time a friend told you about something they loved. Different feeling, right? That's how podcast advertising works. A host who's built real trust with their audience talks about your brand in their own words, in their own voice. It doesn't interrupt the experience. It's part of it. With Acast, you can access the world's largest podcast marketplace. Choose the right shows, the right audiences, the right format. Then watch the data tell you it worked. You're not buying impressions. You're buying influence. Learn more by visiting acast.com/advertise.